Inside Courtroom 7 of the Southern District Federal Court of New York, the air was dry, filtered, sterile. The kind of air that makes truth feel heavier than lies. For nearly 2 hours, Shah Diddy had not moved. His fingers, adorned with 2 rings that once symbolized music empire dominance, rested calmly on the mahogany table. He had not blinked often. He had not spoken a word. His eyes, shielded behind lightly tinted prescription lenses, tracked the courtroom like a hawk surveying prey. Across from him, seated in the witness stand, was the boy he once lifted on his shoulders during award shows. Justin King Commies, now 28, wearing a black suit, no tie, hands folded, face unreadable, voice steady. He wasn't scheduled to appear today. No one, not even the prosecution, had publicly confirmed he would testify. That's what made everything more dangerous. At exactly 2:31 p.m., after a brief discussion between the clerk and the lead prosecutor, King was asked to take the stand. Diddy didn't react. Not when King walked past him. Not when the file in his hands brushed the edge of the defendant's table. But when King uttered the sentence that shattered the quiet like glass on marble, "I know about the tunnel, and I have the evidence," something in Diddy posture shifted, barely, but noticeably. His right foot pulled in slightly. His shoulders tensed, though only someone trained to spot body language would have noticed. The courtroom cameras didn't miss a beat. They zoomed in. The judge leaned forward, unsure. King kept talking. This file was submitted through encrypted channels. Last minute, yes, but verified. The prosecutor nodded. Diddy didn't blink. "Inside is an audio recording," King continued, "taken from beneath the 3rd floor of the Holy Hills mansion." That was when Diddy stood up. Not slowly, not with a raised hand or polite interruption. He rose like a man stepping into a storm. Court security didn't move at first. Why would they? He was the defendant, yes, but he was also Diddy a man who had performed at presidential inaugurations. A man who had once been on the cover of Forbes, GQ, and Time within the same calendar year. But he didn't head toward the judge, or the exit. He walked straight toward the witness stand. At first, it seemed he might be approaching his son for a rebuttal, a whisper, perhaps even a handshake. But his stride was too direct, too focused, too fueled. By the time anyone realized what was happening, he had passed the wooden barrier, bypassed the defense table, and reached King Commies. Then came the push. Not a slap, not a swing. A full-bodied shove that sent the younger man stumbling backward against the chair. The room exploded. Gasps, a scream. The thudding boots of 3 court officers rushing in from the corners of the room. One of them dropped a file. Another drew a taser but didn't fire. It took exactly 14 seconds to restrain Diddy During that time, the courtroom microphone was still live, capturing every moment. The sound of the struggle, the grunt from Diddy and a phrase almost shouted but drowned in the chaos. "I can't keep going. If they find out about the..." Then silence, abrupt, chilling. The judge slammed the gavel. "Court is adjourned for a recess. 90 minutes. Clear the room." The camera feed was cut. Journalists who had been live tweeting went silent. The screen above the jury stand froze on a frame, showing Diddy hand midair, mouth open, eyes wild. The file King had held remained on the floor, its pages scattered beneath the witness stand. One sheet, half crumpled, displayed a grainy black-and-white floor plan of the Holy Hills estate. In the corner, handwritten, were the words, "West Corridor." vent shaft, no camera feed. Diddy Combe, now seated again, was handcuffed, breathing heavily, not looking at his son, not looking at anyone, just staring ahead. His glasses had fallen during the scuffle. One lens cracked. A drop of sweat slid down his temple. King, by contrast, said nothing. He didn't stand. He didn't flinch. He sat there, straight-backed, and looked at no one in particular, just downward, toward the file he had tried to present. A female court reporter wiped her face. A security guard adjusted his collar as if the room had suddenly turned hotter. But the HVAC system hummed on, indifferent to human unraveling. Outside the courthouse, the press descended. Headlines exploded. Diddy Combe attacks son in federal court. Holy Hills mansion linked to secret tunnel. Trial chaos. Evidence leaked live on microphone. By the time the court reconvened, the file had been reassembled and sealed by federal agents. The judge's demeanor had changed. Less procedural, more personal. He looked at Diddy Combe not as a man on trial, but as someone who had crossed a line few dared even to approach. The prosecution requested the next session be moved to a restricted room. The defense team objected, citing media frenzy, not safety. But their voices were small, unconvincing. Diddy Combe still hadn't spoken. King was escorted out through a rear hallway. His eyes met no one's, but as he passed a CCTV camera mounted above Courtroom 7's south door, he looked directly into it. That still image, his face pale, jaw clenched, file under his arm, would later be printed on the cover of 3 major newspapers, captioned only with the words, "The son who opened the basement." In the courthouse elevator that carried King away from the floor, a technician silently hit the B button. Basement. But King didn't react. He simply pressed his fingers against his temple, closed his eyes, and whispered, "I told them not to let it reach this point." No one responded. No one dared. Back in Courtroom 7, the clerk resumed documentation. The audio file King had mentioned was submitted officially into evidence. Its file name was Sub B3 Unknown 38's Wave. The judge ordered the playback delayed until the FBI verified its contents. A motion was filed for emergency analysis. The team from Quantico was already en route. But as the room emptied, Diddy Combe looked up once more. For the first time since the incident, his lips parted, just enough to whisper one word: tunnel. Then a shadow of something not anger but fear passed across his face. And in that moment, everyone present, lawyer, journalist, juror, or court guard, understood this wasn't the climax. It was just the crack in the surface, the first tremor before the collapse, the beginning of something far deeper than a trial, something buried, something meant never to be unearthed. But now it was too late. Because the basement had been mentioned, the file had been played, and a father had attacked his son, not to deny the truth, but to delay it, even if only for one more minute. At 9:11 a.m. the following morning, while the streets of Manhattan still shook with the weight of 100 camera crews setting up outside the federal courthouse, a single steel door inside the Manhattan District Legal Archives office swung open under a sealed directive from federal prosecutors. 3 federal agents entered, each holding a separate set of credentials, eyes fixed on the vault in front of them. The clerk on duty hesitated. "This file isn't in the digital index," he said, voice shaking. One of the agents simply nodded. "That's why we're here." Inside the vault was a single black folder, unmarked, save for a red circular dot placed on the spine, as if someone knew exactly what to mark for someone else to find. The file was labeled K-4A. Within minutes, it was in the hands of the FBI forensic team assigned to the Diddy trial. Not even 12 hours had passed since the altercation in Courtroom 7, but the consequences had already begun to multiply. At the prosecution's temporary analysis room 2 floors above, a dozen specialists surrounded the file like surgeons prepping for a procedure. When the folder was opened, there was no written statement, no typed declaration, only a single line handwritten at the top of an otherwise blank page. I had access to level B3, Western Basement, audio and camera system. There was no signature, no date, but what came next required no introduction. A USB drive, matte black, no logo, and embedded with an ID tag belonging to a now-defunct encryption company based in Luxembourg. Once inserted into the secure terminal, the drive revealed only one file. Sub-level 3 audio 3.8 wave. No video, no visuals, just 38 seconds of audio. But those 38 seconds changed everything. The forensic audio team from Quantico, led by Agent Veronica Albright, began analysis immediately. Within 10 minutes, the room temperature dropped, not from the air conditioning, but from the sound. The audio began with metallic grinding, sharp, erratic, not unlike a gate being pried open. Then breathing. Not the calm kind, but ragged, frantic, like someone struggling against restraints. The sound of fabric rubbing stone, a distant echo. Then came the names. Not spoken directly, but muttered, half-formed. 3 syllables at a time, some distorted, some crystal clear. Names the public would recognize, names linked to music awards, fashion houses, even politics. A faint thud followed. Something heavy fallen, then silence. Or so they thought. On forensic playback with spectral isolation, a soft, pulsating rhythm emerged. Not a heartbeat, but a digital tracking signal. Precisely spaced beeps, consistent with military-grade RFID motion sensors. The kind used for personnel surveillance in restricted access facilities. That fact alone triggered a cascade of alarms within the prosecution's office. The only place such equipment could exist was under government contract or in private systems built by experts. If this was recorded inside the Holy Hills mansion Diddy Combs' private estate, it would mean someone had constructed a clandestine tracking system beneath a celebrity compound. And someone else had recorded it. When the prosecutor reviewed the analysis, his hands trembled. "Where exactly is this basement?" he asked. The tech team opened the next file in the folder. It was a blueprint, a partial floor plan of the Holy Hills estate, dated 2050, but different. This plan had a section that wasn't present in any official record. A corridor labeled West B3. A note scribbled in English read, "Ventilation shaft leads to private client room. Unauthorized entry triggers sound-only capture system." The implication was staggering. Not only was there a room beneath the house that had been hidden from official blueprints, but it was also equipped with audio triggers and possibly other sensors. The sound was not an accident. It was a feature. In Courtroom 5 later that morning, a decision was made to present the file to the jury. The defense team objected immediately, citing unverified chain of custody, but the judge overruled, citing national interest. What happened next silenced the entire room. As the audio played, even Diddy Comb did not breathe. From the first metallic screech, the atmosphere changed. Jurors shifted. Court guards unconsciously placed their hands near their holsters. A female assistant to the district attorney dropped her pen. The sound of the falling object striking tile echoed unnaturally loud. When the breathing intensified in the final seconds of the clip, a low gasp spread across the gallery. Not from fear, but from recognition. And in the last second 38, came a whisper. Male, deliberate, chilling. It's always your own blood. No one in the room claimed to know the voice, but several staffers recalled a live backstage stream from 3 years ago where Diddy, seated in a studio drenched in red light, laughed alone in the dark. The whisper in the audio matched the rhythm, the cadence even the tone. When the clip ended, no one applauded. No one spoke. Diddy sat frozen. His left hand trembled visibly. His right shoulder was tensed unnaturally. His lawyer leaned in to whisper something, but Diddy didn't respond. Not with a nod, not even with a blink. Behind them, the screen on the evidence display system flickered. The file name remained. Sub-level 3 audio 38.wave. But below it, a folder structure appeared, a tree, labeled not with names but with dates, 0106, 0206, 0306, each folder containing more files, 7 in total. One dated 1406, the exact day the Holy Hills mansion was searched. The prosecutor looked at the judge. No words exchanged. A nod, permission granted. One video was selected at random. 0306 Pava, and the courtroom projector activated. Static. Then dim light. Then the flickering pattern of what seemed like decorative bulbs behind frosted glass. No faces visible, just shadows. But the sound again. The sound revealed more. A door closed. Loud, metal on tile. Then footsteps. 3 distinct sets. One voice, male, calm, measured. We'll call this the playroom. No one leaves here without consent. Gasps, audible. A woman in the press row covered her mouth. A man in the front gallery stood abruptly before being ordered to sit down. Diddy face was not shown. But at the end of the clip, a low, raspy chuckle echoed, one that at least 3 people in the room instinctively turned toward him for. That reaction alone prompted the judge to call for a 15-minute recess to review the clip's admissibility. In the hallway, outside the courtroom, one of Diddy attorneys was caught on a security camera whispering into a burner phone. If clip Z0506 leaks, he's not the only one going to prison. That line, leaked within hours to the press, sparked mass speculation. Who else was involved? What did Z0506 contain? Was it part of the same system? Above the courtroom, the FBI legal team convened an emergency review. 3 prosecutors debated whether to issue a warrant for the full-floor plan of Holy Hills, including sublevels never previously accessed. Downstairs, as the court prepared to reconvene, a handwritten message was passed from an unnamed source to the prosecution's bench. Its content was brief. King knows more than he says. There's a letter. When Justin King Commies re-entered the courtroom, he did so with a new expression, not of defiance, but of something else, dread. As he sat, he looked not at the judge, not at the jury, but at his father, not with anger, but with fear. And as his gaze crossed the lens of the live feed camera streaming the trial, the comment section online exploded. Why does he look that scared? What's in the letter? Is there more? There was more, and they were about to see it. But first, a single line of text appeared on the evidence screen, in bold, in silence. Sub-level 3. The door that was never meant to open. At that exact moment, a woman seated in the fourth row, identified later as a freelance music journalist, broke into tears. Not from emotion, but from recognition. "I've been there," she whispered before being escorted out. And inside that courtroom, everyone knew. The next video wouldn't just rattle a courtroom. It might shatter an entire industry. The courtroom no longer felt like a courtroom. With every second that passed since the words "Sublevel 3, the door that was never meant to open," appeared on the projector screen, the air became colder, heavier, like the oxygen itself was thickening with the weight of what was about to be revealed. At 10:59 a.m., after a brief recess filled with whispers that crawled like shadows along the hallway, the court was called back to order. No one spoke. Even the judge, whose voice once carried like iron through the chamber, now sounded distant, wrapped in uncertainty. A second projector had been wheeled in, connected directly to the FBI's evidence cabinet. The agent in charge unlocked the unit with 4 separate authorizations, each one confirmed by a separate technician. Red light blinked on the panel, signaling full access. And then, with the press of a single key, the screen lit up. The file, 0506/AV. The room held its collective breath. The screen faded in from black, revealing a narrow concrete corridor, dimly lit by a single flickering fluorescent bulb, like a dying eye refusing to close. The camera shook slightly, as if hidden inside a coat pocket. The viewer's perspective moved forward slowly, accompanied only by the sound of footsteps, soft but deliberate, echoing off the damp stone walls. A man's voice emerged. Not Diddy. Someone else, calm, almost warm. "They call this Sublevel 3. It's only for special guests." No one responded, but shadows moved in the framed glimpses of hands, silhouettes of dark suits and masks white, expressionless, like those seen at masquerade balls, featureless faces passing through the edges of the video. The suffocation wasn't just from the imagery. It was in the pacing, the restraint, the silence between words. The camera paused before a heavy steel door. A hand entered the frame. Male, tanned, a small skull tattoo on the middle finger. The hand entered a passcode. 4 tones beeped. The door clicked open. Darkness, complete. Then soft jazz music began to play. Smooth, contrasting violently with what the room expected. In the background, something screeched. Metal? Chains? It was unclear. The video continued for another 10 seconds, showing only dim, shifting shapes, and then stopped. But before it could fade to black, something in the top left corner of the screen became visible. An old poster, torn, yellowed, hanging by a single pin. It showed a smiling woman in a sequined dress, microphone in hand. A famous pop singer from the late 90s. Once a close friend of Diddy, a woman who disappeared in 2004 during a business trip to Paris and was never seen again. The prosecution ordered the video paused, but the system didn't respond. A technical malfunction occurred. The central server controlling the evidence playback froze. The last 3 seconds of the clip began looping, over and over. Screech, jazz, indistinct panting. Screech, jazz, indistinct panting. 4 times it repeated before a technician pulled the plug. In those moments, the courtroom turned to ice. One of the FBI agents stood up so fast his chair toppled over. He pulled out his earpiece, pale as snow. He leaned over to the lead prosecutor and whispered, "I know the person in that footage, and if that's really her, this won't stop with Diddy." The judge ordered a 5-minute recess, but no one left their seat. No one blinked. On the side of the room, King Commies sat with his head bowed. He had not reacted once during the video, but now his hand was trembling against the wooden bench. The judge requested his removal not as punishment, but for protection. King stood, walked, silent. But before he exited the courtroom, a low murmur escaped from a woman sitting in the gallery. No one had noticed her before, middle-aged, gray coat, glasses too large. But as she rose to leave, she dropped a folder. It landed flat on the tile floor, flipping open. The top page showed a black and white photo of the same staircase from the video, and a single handwritten line. "I was taken down there. I remember the smell of sweat and damp bricks." Court officers retrieved the folder. The judge struck the gavel once. "Court is adjourned until 9 a.m. tomorrow." But before anyone could move, a voice from the back of the courtroom, a technician from the evidence team, stood and spoke 4 words. "We haven't seen A706. The room turned. Silence fell harder than before. That folder, A706, had not been mentioned publicly. It was part of the deeper structure within the evidence drive, and it was password protected. When asked earlier if the court could access it, King had said nothing. But now his silence became the center of gravity. That afternoon, federal investigators reviewed King's residency record and found something disturbing. In the summer of 2019, King Commies had stayed at Holy Hills for 22 consecutive days. That alone was not incriminating. But cross-referenced with 3 missing persons reports from nearby states, each tied to young adults who disappeared that same month, GPS records placed all 3 within 1 kilometer of the estate. The press had not been informed yet. But inside the Department of Justice's temporary war room on the 11th floor, red folders began multiplying. Names, photos, connections. And at the center of it all, Sub-Level 3. That night, multiple networks canceled scheduled programming to run emergency specials. CNN ran the headline, "Basement of the Stars, What's Under Holy Hills." Twitter exploded with hashtags, #Sub-Level 3, #King Commies Truth, #Basement Files. Diddy Comb remained under legal hold. Silent. Not one public statement. His legal team requested a gag order. It was denied. Meanwhile, footage from 2007 surfaced showing Diddy giving a tour of his home. He walks past a hallway and jokingly says, "Can't show you what's down there. That's where the secrets live." At the time, it was a line delivered with a smile. Now, it played like prophecy. The next morning, the courtroom was guarded like a military compound. Security tripled. No press allowed inside. Only one goal remained. Open folder A706. The password was unknown. The tension was immeasurable. And the file once opened would do more than reveal faces. It would reveal intent, motive, memory, and something else entirely, proof. But until then, as the courthouse lights dimmed and every breath in the room was held in collective suspense, one thing had already become clear. This was not just a trial. This was the dissection of a myth, a fall from power, a son's quiet rebellion against an empire built on silence. And the door that had never been meant to open had finally creaked wide enough for the world to peek inside. At exactly 7 a.m., the next morning, before sunlight reached the high windows of the Southern District Federal Courthouse, A convoy of black government vehicles arrived and formed a protective corridor along the east entrance. No one spoke. The wind rustled lightly along the edges of the temporary press barrier, but the air was otherwise still, unnaturally still. Inside, in Courtroom 5, everything had already been arranged. A lead-encased hard drive was placed on the center evidence table, guarded by 4 agents and connected to a direct line bypassing the court's standard system. The screen that would display its content stood like an altar. Behind it, no journalist, no public observers, only the court, the federal team, and the man everyone had come to see. Justin King Combs. He entered through a side door, flanked by 2 agents. Gone was the crisp black suit from the day before. In its place was a gray protective hoodie, eyes barely visible beneath its edge. He did not look up, did not glance toward his father, did not even glance at the screen. His attorney held a document in hand, a last-minute statement. But the court clerk refused to admit it into record, citing a lack of verification. So the judge gave one instruction. "Mr. Combs, you may enter the password when ready." The screen flickered. The black interface pulsed once, revealing the locked directory. Home 0706. Below it, personal audio plus footage. King took slow, measured steps to the desk. His fingers hovered above the keyboard. He breathed in, out, then shook his head. There's only one person who knew the code. And that person is gone. The room didn't move. For a second, the judge himself seemed unsure whether to repeat the question. Then King added, "If you want to open that folder, dig behind the 4th room in the Holy Hills basement." Some in the courtroom blinked, confused. Others smirked, thinking it a stall tactic. But the FBI did not. One of the senior female investigators immediately stood and whispered to the prosecution. Within 5 minutes, a remote field team stationed at Holy Hills sent a fax. It included a photo taken less than an hour before. A section of exposed brick in the 4th room's west wall broken open. Inside it, a military-grade safe box with a red warning label. "Do not open without judicial authorization." The judge called for a 1-hour recess, but no one left. They simply watched as the hard drive was unlocked using the code retrieved from the physical safe moments later. The system confirmed access with a beep that echoed like a hammer on steel. The first prompt appeared. Auto-sync active, play or extract. The judge ordered, "Play, no interruptions." The screen flickered to life. The frame was grainy, low resolution. The camera shook as it was positioned and then stabilized on a small room with no windows. Amber lighting glowed weakly from overhead fixtures. Circular mirrors lined the walls. In the center, one leather chair. Then came the voice. Male. Not Diddy Comb. Someone else, laughing. "Round 2. You ready?" A soft voice responded. Female, panicked. "Please, turn off the light. Don't record anymore." The judge immediately called, "Stop the clip." But the message was already clear. The female voice was not anonymous. Not to everyone. 2 people in the gallery gasped audibly. A Rolling Stone journalist texted her editor without looking away from the screen, and the phrase "Round 2" began trending on social media minutes later as footage leaked to insiders. Back in the courtroom, Diddy Comb remained still. He hadn't blinked, hadn't moved. His fingers, now clenched around the edges of his seat, had turned pale. And King, no longer at the terminal, had sat back down, eyes to the floor. The prosecution moved to request a closed session for King's testimony. It was granted. The courtroom was cleared. In that sealed space, with only the court, agents, attorneys, and 2 technicians remaining, King spoke for the first time in full sentences. "I wasn't the first to be made to record. There were others before me, and after me too. I'm just the first one alive who dared to speak." The judge asked him to clarify. He nodded. "They used us for leverage, for memory, for control." The agents took notes. The attorneys went pale. And then the court ordered a new investigation, multi-state, multi-agency, into facilities operated under shell companies tied to Diddy Combs' former holding groups. Outside, the media had caught wind of something bigger. A leak revealed that folder 0706 was not the final archive. Deep within the same drive, another section was labeled Mirror Vault, encrypted with a cipher algorithm not used outside high-level defense contractors. The question now wasn't just what happened in Sublevel 3, it was who helped build it. That same afternoon, several former Diddy Comb lawyers filed for withdrawal. One was quoted anonymously by a legal correspondent. "I don't think I have the moral backbone to stay in this case." Inside the court, another clip was played. No faces visible, just the chair, the mirrors, the shadows. But a transcript was read aloud by the court clerk. "A room with no exit. A voice says, 'This is a right, not coercion.' A second voice laughs. A cloth is removed. A logo becomes visible." As the line was read, King leaned forward and whispered something inaudible. His attorney placed a hand on his back. The court adjourned again, but not before another folder surfaced. Labeled May 2023, it contained a list. Names, dates, sessions. A prosecutor looked up and said, "These are Grammy winners." A second replied, "One of them ran for Congress." At that moment, the courtroom wasn't silent because of order. It was silent because of awe, because everyone inside knew this trial had broken past the bounds of the courtroom. It had reached the soul of an industry. It had torn the curtain from a legacy built on light, revealing only darkness underneath. And that darkness had a name. Mirror Vault. With every clip played, every line of transcript read, the world outside fractured further. A label dropped its artist. A network canceled a music awards show. A producer turned themselves in. Diddy Comb did not react. But his image, once impenetrable, now flickered like a broadcast losing signal. In the final hour of that day's session, one final question was raised. Is this everything? And King, standing to leave, whispered, "Not even close." Outside, storm clouds gathered over Manhattan. Reporters asked each other not about what would happen tomorrow, but whether the court could even continue, because what was at stake wasn't just Diddy Combs' freedom, it was the illusion of safety. The fantasy that fame meant trust, that cameras only captured glory, that basements were made for wine, and not for silence. But now silence had broken, and all that remained was the reckoning.